We know who the number one running back is in Dynasty, but who's number two? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode of Locked On Dynasty is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That is prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. She is Kate Magdziuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, what's going on today?
Nothing. I'm excited to rank some running backs. We had fun with our wide receivers. And Marcus, we talked about this on the wide receivers show. Holy smokes. Does ranking these running backs for Dynasty feel so much more difficult? There are so many big name injuries. We've got just a lot of moving pieces in the running back field that make this just uber challenging, especially closing out such a wacky season as we had in 2022.
It sucks. It's so hard. So, do you want me to make the challenging pick here? Do you want to go first?
You know, Marcus, I'll give you the honor. I picked number 1 overall in our wide receiver rankings and had the absolute challenge of doing that. I will give it right back to you. Go ahead. Give us our number 1 Dynasty.
All right. So this one's easy. It's Jonathan Taylor. And I know he had a bad year this year. It's whatever. He's still such a talented player. He's on a team that wants to run the ball. I think the offensive line is going to be much better next year. He's only 23. He got a little bit more involved in the passing game. I just really don't think it's all that close.
I think that's totally fair.
Good luck.
Yeah. Now I have to really start to shake things up. And I am going to shake things up, Marcus, because right now the consensus RB2 in Dynasty feels like it's Breece Hall, right? 21 years old, New York Jets running back, lots of opportunity, looked like an absolute stud to start the 2022 season, but unfortunately has suffered a torn ACL. And, you know, obviously we haven't gotten to see him play in the second half of the season. I'm going to make a surprise pick, and I'm going to roll with Kenneth Walker here, who feels like there's a lot of upside here. Seattle Seahawks are obviously in kind of they're in flux, right? They're moving on from Russell Wilson. They've got some draft capital. They've got some different pieces and parts that they can play with. But the one thing we know is that Russell Wilson left town, and this offense didn't seem to miss a beat. Kenneth Walker, he's got the speed. Oh my goodness, he's got the speed. He's got the breakaway ability. He is my favorite pure runner in the class, though Breece Hall, yes, I think, was a more well-rounded prospect. I just think it's really hard to beat Kenneth Walker with the age. The fact that he's healthy is what breaks the tie over Breece Hall, because, I mean, Marcus, we've seen a million times, running backs don't just bounce right back from injury. It can take some time. And while we wait for that and see how Breece Hall recovers, I'm going to enjoy some fantasy points from Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, he would have been my option or my pick at number 2. The only thing you worry about is the receiving game, but even then, he's been a little bit more involved. 6 catches in the last 2 weeks gives you some hope that, listen, he doesn't need to be a guy that catches 70 passes a year to have value, but if he can eventually get up into that 35-40 range, okay, that's more than fine. So love it, that pick. All right, my pick at 3. Can't believe you passed on this guy. You must hate Austin Eckler, because that's who I'm going
No.
with. I know he's 27. All right, which is older than you want your RB3 in Dynasty to be. I just think his game is going to age really well because he's such a good receiver. He doesn't need a lot of carries to be productive. He's scored 36 touchdowns over the last 2 years, led the NFL in touchdowns last year. It's going to lead the NFL again this year. He's on a team and with a quarterback that loves to throw him the ball. There's just a lot of safety here. Right? The floor is so high because of the receiving production. And then the ceiling's also high because he scores 1 million touchdowns. So give me Austin Eckler at 3, even despite being 27 years old.
Yeah, I'm heartbroken because that was going to be my next pick because I assumed you were going to go Breece Hall here. Among running backs right now, 6 in total opportunities, first in targets, first in receiving yards, first in touchdowns, first in points per game. Like Austin Eckler is such a stud. Over the last 2 seasons, he has been an RB1 in almost 70% of his games played. Literally, there has been one instance over the last 2 seasons where he has scored fewer than 10 fantasy points.
Wow.
And I believe it was like 9.
Yeah.
So even then, didn't ruin your week. But my favorite stat about Austin Eckler, I tweeted this out a little bit earlier today. Austin Eckler has had 2 more finishes as the overall RB1 in a given week this year than he has finishes outside of the top 24. 2 more finishes as the overall RB1 for fantasy,
Wild.
Marcus. Like this dude, his ceiling is sky high. He has finished as a top 5 running back this year alone in 9 games.
And you know the other thing I like about Eckler, there's a chance, Kate, that he just falls off and he's not an RB1 anymore, right? He's just not scoring the touchdowns and maybe they limit his rushing ability. But I don't see this as a guy that's just all of a sudden going to fall off the face of the earth, right? Like he's going to have value as a receiver into his 30s, very similar to like Darren Sproles, right? Who played forever in the NFL. I know that's not why you rank this guy at RB3, but that's really nice to know that you're always going to have a floor where, hey, even if the bottom falls out, this is still a guy that I can plug in as my RB2 every single week and not really have to worry about him.
I mean, the nice thing is too, you've got, for Austin Eckler, he's got a little bit more size on Darren Sproles. Like he's got a little bit, I think of Austin Eckler just as a little bit more meaty. And I think I love everything about Austin Eckler. I love his game. I love the way he takes care of himself. And I think that the safety of him as a receiver is going to elongate his career far beyond our expectations for a 27-year-old running back.
I agree. All right, you're up next.
All right. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to roll with Breece Hall, who, like I said, best, I think, overall running back in the 2022 class. Upside is tremendous. I think that, once this team finds a, stability at the quarterback position, they are going to have all of the pieces they need within this offense to be incredibly, incredibly successful. Now, we saw usage of Michael Carter, in the beginning of the season, but, even without Breece Hall, we started to see that kind of taper away. They gave carries to Zonovan Knight. It's clear that they are missing the one piece that they don't have, and that is Breece Hall. He's going to be, I think, a big part of this offense for a long time to come. Average 4.13 yards after contact per attempt this year, which ranks 9th among all running backs, 1st among all running backs that had at least 70 carries on the year. So he's been a stud, 5.8 yards per attempt. Just so much to love about Breece Hall and what he offers in the receiving game as a rusher. There's just so much to like.
It's just a bet on talent and situation and age, which at the running back position, honestly, a lot of the times that's just the best way to go. Like just bet on the guys that are young and talented and to have the draft capital like he does. I think if we're talking about like as RB2, that's where it gets a little hairy, but as RB4, I know that doesn't seem like a big difference, but it is when you're valuing
feels like
these
one.
guys. Yeah. I think that's a good spot. All right, let's get to the rest of the picks, Kate. But before we do that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we are sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from the league available as a bonus episode of Locked On NFL, narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of the league, or catch the full series available wherever you get your podcast. Available now, Audible. Get in the game. All right, Kate, pick number 5. I'm on the board. Christian McCaffrey. I pushed back a little bit this offseason when people were ranking him as RB1 or RB2. I thought that was a little high, but as RB5, I can get on board. Despite changing teams this year, still over 1,600 yards this season, scoring a bunch of touchdowns. He's PFF's number 1 graded receiver. He's in an offense that's super efficient. I think I'm good with him here at RB5. I think that's where it makes sense.
Leads all active running backs in fantasy points per game, 19 fantasy points per game in half PPR formats. And we know that much like Austin Eckler, with receiving being such a crucial part of his game, that helps to provide some longevity, right? Like, despite the fact that he's got plenty of miles on the tires, tied for the 7th most scrimmage touches alongside Leonard Fournette since entering the league. And, he's got plenty of juice left, I think, as long as they keep utilizing him in those situations that make him successful, aka utilizing him as a receiver, which we can't stress enough, helps to set that floor awful high, but that ceiling high as well.
All right, Kate, we're at pick number 6 now. Gets a little wonky here. Who do you got?
Oh, it does get a little wonky.
Sorry, I was muted. That's why we had a little bit of a pause there.
It is a little wonky, Marcus, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm a little concerned about this player personally, but again, when we go back to, like we mentioned earlier, talent, age, situation, I'm going to roll with Travis Etienne here, who I think his ceiling is absolutely sky high. He's 23 years old. The Jacksonville Jaguars, we're seeing them start to put these pieces together. Young quarterback who's been able to make plays, but I do think that overall, I've been a little bit disappointed. I'm sorry. A little bit disappointed with Travis
How could you not be?
Etienne. It's been hard. RB 18 in full PPR leagues this year, which, just 3 finishes as an RB1 overall. Since that 3-game stretch, weeks 7 through 9, has had 4 finishes as RB3 or worse. It's not been pretty. What I'm really hoping for is some more opportunities as a receiver. Ranks 22nd among running backs in terms of targets this year. It feels unnatural for a guy whose best skill set is as a receiver. And my hope is that as he continues to develop as an NFL running back, they will get him more involved as a receiver. Because I think, we've already seen the connection between him and Trevor Lawrence in the receiving game. Let's see that come to fruition at the NFL level.
I agree. I think it's easy to be at least a little bit disappointed with how the year's gone, but overall still very encouraged. Okay, my next one. It's just a bet on talent. I know it's been rough. How about DeAndre Swift? We actually talked about him a couple days ago. Still only 23. Looks really good whenever he's on the field. Doesn't really score rushing touchdowns, which is a little concerning, but I like the future of this offense. I like the offensive line. I just hope that he can stay healthy because he is a uber dynamic player that I think could eventually be like an Austin Eckler type if things work out.
I think that's a very fair assessment here. DeAndre Swift, like when he does get the touches, we've seen such a high ceiling. We know he's a very talented receiver. We know this team's trending up. I love the pick. I think he's such a great buy, especially like right now as we see these really low touch total games where you're just wondering what the heck is going on. I like it. Not much to say.
It's just, man, you are really betting on age and talent because 400 rushing yards this year, 280 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Like the guys that were ranking behind him, like Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb, they've all been so much more productive than him. But again, it's just a bet on age and talent.
I think that's totally fair. Next up, I do want to shout out a running back that you just mentioned, actually, running back Josh Jacobs, who for right now is a Las Vegas Raider. Not for long, though, I don't think.
Did you hear his little press conference after the Steeler game?
He had a lot to say.
He said, I've been here for 4 years and nothing's really changed, and they stopped running the ball. It's like, okay, Josh, we'll see you later. You're clearly, you don't want to be here.
He does not want to be there. And I think, he's really proven himself out since the team declined his 5th-year option. He's having a career year, averaging 102 rush yards per game, having a career high in terms of yards per rush attempt, five yards per attempt, ranks 2nd among running backs in yards after contact, is the heavy favorite to win his first NFL rushing title. He's forcing missed tackles. Like he's absolutely looked dominant. And I feel like it has reminded the NFL why he was drafted as a 1st-round pick. Marcus, it feels like even the franchise tag would be kind of a silly, move. I don't, they could have had a guaranteed salary for Jacobs of just over $8 million. The franchise tag, according to CBS Sports projections, is going to be around $10 million for the running back position in 2023. Like if it feels like they're not going to be willing to pay an extra $2 million to rectify a mistake when they've got bigger issues. So I'm seeing this as an opportunity for Josh Jacobs to get paid and be the focal point of an offense that is willing to pay him a lot of money. He's just shown in 2022 why he is elite.
A lot of good running backs still on the board, Kate, including Saquon Barkley, who the Dynasty running back has him listed as RB4 right now. We still have got Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, who are going to be the final 2 picks. Can't wait to get to that. But before we do, want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online's so awesome. We look at the lines all the time over there. Bet Online is your #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, and we know that you do because you're listening to one right now, you can even find those at Bet Online as well. It's always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. I also want to let you know about a public service announcement from the National Highway and Safety Association. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that a law enforcement officer that's trained to be able to tell won't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time down and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA. Kate, I'm on the board here at number 9. Just listed all the running backs. I'm going to make a surprise pick for you. A surprise one. You ready?
I'm ready.
Tony Pollard.
Whoa!
I'm ranking Tony Pollard as a top 10 dynasty running back for a couple different reasons. Tony Pollard having a monster year, 1,300 yards, actually 1,359 and 12 touchdowns. He made the Pro Bowl this year, despite only starting 4 games. He's a free agent, which is actually great for his dynasty value for a couple of reasons. Because number one, if the Cowboys re-sign him, it means that they believe they're going to give him a bigger role going forward on an already awesome offense, or he hits free agency and gets absolutely paid by like the Miami Dolphins, and now he's going to be in a featured role. Super talented, one of the most explosive running backs we have in the league. All the advanced numbers from the last 3 years that he's like one of the top 2 or 3 backs in the league. Taking Tony Pollard at number 9. Vote of confidence.
This is a very bold move, one that I am not bold enough to make, but I love it. We've talked, it feels like incessantly about his upside and the fact that he's got all this upside, even on a limited touch basis, which makes it all the more impressive. He's just so efficient. He's so explosive. There's so many elements of his game that I love. I love his ability as a receiver. I love the way he plays out of the slot. Like there's so much to like. I'm just not bold enough to do it. Consensus ranking right now, in terms of his Dynasty startup ADP for the month of September, RB15. So actually consensus, not that far behind you, Marcus. Not that far at all.
There's no way I'm taking Najee Harris over him. 0, none.
I kind of agree.
Yeah. And who are some of the other names ahead
myself.
of him? It's like Dalvin
Joe
Cook.
Mixon.
Yeah, no way. Derrick
Ramondre
Henry.
Stevenson.
I love Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry's gonna be 29 years old next year.
Yep. Yeah, I would take probably in a startup. Yes, I would take Tony Pollard over Derrick Henry.
So there you go. All right, your last pick.
Ooh, oh, Marcus, this was a tough one. There are a lot of really talented names still left on the board, but I'm gonna go ahead with the theme of longevity here, and I'm gonna stick with a running back I really like, Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, that's a good pick. He probably should have went higher. That's a good pick.
He should have gone higher, but I understand the concerns. He touches the ball a lot. He's got high touch totals. Going to be 26 this offseason, and not necessarily been a guy that you've been able to rely on week in and week out because of the fact that he's had some health issues. But Marcus, despite those health issues, he's been dominant, right? Like missed plenty of games, played just 59 games among all of his games, and he's totaled 29 rushing yards. That's the 17th most among any active running back in the NFL, despite all that missed time. He's just been super productive. 9th among active running backs in total rushing yards. He's explosive. He's everything that you want in a tough runner. But my favorite thing about him, of course, has to be the fact that he is an excellent receiver. That is what is going to help.
To be honest,
I want him out of New York, but Marcus, it hasn't mattered, right? Like it really hasn't mattered the fact that he's been in New York, because he's still been productive and he's been able to produce beyond the offense and what that offense gives him. He is the RB5 this season in an offense with Daniel Jones and virtually no receivers. Like he is the only threat in that offense, and defenses know that. And yet he still has finished as an RB1 or an RB2 in all but 2 games this year, averaging almost 20 PPR points per game. Like he's a stud. He's so safe. And I think that this ability as a receiver is going to keep him buoyed in the fantasy realm for a long time to come.
Last thing I want to mention before we head out, no Javonte Williams, who at one point this offseason was up to RB2 in Dynasty.
That injury, man.
I know. Najee Harris, not in this. He had him inside the top 3 earlier this year. No J.K. Dobbins, who was a consensus top 10 running back all offseason. No Nick Chubb, who is starting to slowly fall outside of the top 10. I think a lot of other people would have him at 8, 9, or 10. Maybe that's just because he is getting a little bit older. So what's weird is I don't love drafting the running backs at 2, 3, and 4, but at like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's where I want to be. And I want to get as many of those guys on my teams as possible, because I think that's where the value is.
I just don't think you can't go wrong with the running. Like it's difficult to rank these guys in like the 7 to maybe 15 range, because they all feel like they're very similarly tiered. So if you're in a
Wait,
dynasty startup, that's an opportunity for you to trade back into that
yes,
range, accumulate
yes.
some more picks in that range, and potentially walk away with a ton of value.
You're right. In a startup draft, if you can move down and pick up 3 of these guys, you're great because I don't know if you could trade say if you could trade Austin Eckler, who we have as RB3, for Saquon Barkley and a lot more, like maybe minimally more. But there's going to be people in your league that just value Barkley more than Austin Eckler straight up, which is why this is so hard to do. But just to put a bow on our rankings, Jonathan Taylor at 1, Kenneth Walker at 2, Austin Eckler at 3, Breece Hall at 4, Christian McCaffrey at 5, Travis Etienne at 6, DeAndre Swift at 7, Josh Jacobs at 8, Tony Pollard at 9, Saquon Barkley rounding out the top 10. What do you think?
I think it feels good. But like you said, a lot of names that like feel like we totally ignored and left off the list. But again, such a testament to the
Yes.
value of the running back position in that range. I love it.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On Sports Today podcast. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Kate, you and I will be back on Friday to break down this Titans-Cowboy game. Another Malik Willis start that I'm sure we're going to be gushing about and discussing. Hopefully
Sure
not. I mean,
thing.
it's happening against my Cowboys. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. Enjoy the game. We'll see you right back here on Friday.